This video is brought to you by Straight Goods News, Canada's alternative online news source. Visit straightgoods.ca.
Thank you very much. The Auditor General's report today reveals chronic and widespread mismanagement of management information systems, which means chronic and widespread mismanagement in the federal government departments that were covered by the audit. We have a government under Mr. Harper that is renowned for its secrecy and lack of transparency, and a government that centralizes information flows. And we're seeing some of the results in some of the government departments today. It shows a profound disrespect in the accountability that the federal government has to the Canadian public that we are seeing this chronic and widespread mismanagement and this inability to effectively manage many of the programs that we've seen. What I'd like to do before I pass things over to my colleague is just quickly review the 5 chapters of the Auditor General's report. First off, on the Economic Action Plan. It should be a matter of concern to all Canadians that a large and significant stimulus package that was put into place over the last few years has not received the kind of monitoring to actually determine what the job creation has been. Now, we as Canadians aren't going to know with any certainty to what extent the Economic Action Plan worked or not. The government simply has not put into place the monitoring that is required, either in the Community Adjustment Fund or in the other funds that were evaluated by the Auditor General. 72,000 Canadian families lost a full-time breadwinner in the month of October. I think it should be a matter of concern to all Canadians to see this government not monitoring effectively whether their job creation programs are working or not. Secondly, on visas, we are seeing again chronic mismanagement in those areas. We have a system that has not been modernized. In fact, it was surprising to hear that from the Auditor General that one of the key manuals that is being used in the evaluation of visas was last updated in 1999. And we're talking about mismanagement that has not in any way been adjusted over the last 5 years of this government. There continue to be concerns about the delays in visa applications, and there are also concerns about the updating around public health evaluation. As the Auditor General has indicated, we're still screening for the same 2 diseases we've been screening for the last 50 years. There are now 56 communicable diseases that are of concern to health departments across the country. On agriculture, we're seeing profound disrespect for Canada's farmers. In some cases, farmers having to wait up to 2 years after an income loss to receive a payment from Agriculture Canada. And some of the programs, the tobacco program that was put into place, because it was rushed, allowed for abuse in the system. On pharmaceuticals within Health Canada, there is no doubt that this government is putting Canadian families at risk. Because it takes up to 2 years to identify unsafe drugs, it is very clear that this government is not doing enough to ensure that the drugs that are put forward to Canadian families are safe. Finally, around national defense, maintenance and repair, as you've all followed in the House of Commons, our concerns around the procurement and the lack of transparency around the F-35 contract. We're now seeing that the Department of National Defense is not tracking the full cost of its maintenance and repair activities, is not managing effectively the risk in those programs. And we are seeing, despite the fact that DND promised to put in place a new asset management system in 2004, that we're now looking to wait to potentially 2013, perhaps longer. Those concerns around maintenance and repair have not been followed up on with DND and have not been followed up on with this government. So what we're seeing is a pattern with former Auditor General's report not being followed up on, the government not meeting its timelines, chronic mismanagement and widespread mismanagement and chronic and widespread weaknesses that the Auditor General has identified. And what the Auditor General very clearly pointed to is that there needs to be significant investments to ensure that these weaknesses within the federal government are dealt with. Unfortunately, what we've seen from the government so far is their movement towards an austerity budget coming up in the spring. Very clearly, significant investments need to be made, and it would be a mistake for this government to look at an austerity budget when there are so many concerns with the internal accounting and mechanisms and management information sharing in the management of the federal government. Final point I'd just like to make is that what the Auditor General has also pointed to core elements of effective management in the federal government. And very clearly, when we look at this Auditor General's report, the federal government, the Harper government, is not meeting those core elements for effective management. In several cases identified today, there are real problems, and this government is going to have to make serious adjustments to how it manages federal government programs and how it manages the Canadian citizens' money. There are problems at various levels, chronic and widespread mismanagement, and this government has to act.
Shirley Engel, Global Television.
There are a lot of issues in this report, and some Canadians might wonder where they should focus their attention. They're obviously all important, but I'm wondering if you can identify for us, for the official opposition, what is the single most important issue you saw coming out of this report today?
Oh gosh, well that's tough. I mean, on the one hand, the Economic Action Plan, the failure of this government to do any monitoring with significant federal government investments is a matter of great concern. Then you look at the issues around Health Canada and the fact that this government is putting Canadian families at risk by a long, convoluted process in identifying unsafe drugs. You look at the issues around maintenance and repair for national defense and the mismanagement of the agriculture and visa programs. I mean, every one of them tells a story. The narrative coming out of this report is this government has chronic mismanagement issues, that this government simply is not able to effectively manage government programs, to put in place the monitoring systems, to ensure that taxpayers are getting full value, and ensuring as well that Canadian families are protected by the programs that are put into place. So the narrative of the Auditor General's report is, as he said so eloquently, chronic and widespread mismanagement of management information systems. It's a hallmark of this government, secrecy and centralization. What we're seeing that is now, with this government forming a majority, that the problems that many Canadians have, Mr. Harper's approach to governments is now being played out in what we're seeing from the Auditor General's report.
Okay, so all of them. If I could just zero in on one, on the Health Canada. The Minister of Health, in her statement, says that they took a major step forward by introducing increased user fees, and this was after the audit period was finished, and they said that this money, user fees to companies, can help put in place some of the mechanisms that are needed to make improvements. I'm wondering if you think that's a significant enough step and whether you think that'll help.
I have no confidence in this government's ability to manage that file, and it's a bit counterintuitive to say, well, we're going to charge user fees, and somehow that is going to resolve management problems. We're not seeing when we look at the resources, for example, Economic Action Plan, we're not seeing a problem of resources so much as a problem of management, and I don't have confidence that this government understands the importance of ensuring that unsafe drugs are kept away from Canadian families. And as Mr. Boulris indicated as well, that I do not have confidence that this government's able to eliminate potential conflicts of interest.
Julie Van Dusen, CBC News.
Mr. Julian, the Auditor General said it's hard to measure jobs, job creation, to count them, whatever. So, I mean, you do believe that jobs were created, right? We saw the signs, we saw the shovels, we saw people working. Like, you believe jobs were created?
I believe the signs were created. We saw them across the country, sometimes for projects where the signs, as you know, cost more than the project itself. Do we know how many jobs were created? Just given the bogus job numbers that the government has raised in the House and that we've contested, as you've seen in question period, I don't have confidence that the government is going to come clean on what the full results of the Economic Action Plan were, because they haven't monitored it. So they don't know. That's my conclusion of reading the Auditor General's report. so Canadians can have confidence with whatever figures the government does choose to bring forward. And I'd like to underline, as the Auditor General did, the importance of a full accounting in early 2012. I just don't have confidence that the figures that the government will bring forward are actually based on fact.